But, the whisper suddenly rang out as Zarkal leaned downwards to Ryuk. But why? I should have been the hope of the Nulls. I held the full hurricane energy in me. I should have been the ultimate card for the Nulls to challenge the gods. Why then? Oh, you want to know why? Why, even though you possessed hurricane energy in full, we Nulls still ripped you limb from limb and shared your body out amongst us? He asked. I guess I can grant your last wish. The truth is, separating your body and implanting it into the various calamities was a wasteful move. We could only access so much hurricane energy from your organs. After all, the brutal truth is, it was never ours to begin with. But we couldn't leave it to you. Because of him. Because of your father. Because of Thiath Vorgeth. He is the seething carnage of the Nulls, or at least, he was. He had been overthrown by the council for turning soft. The dragons, which he was supposed to conquer, he fell for, and protected instead. A truly pathetic coward who fell for something as mundane as love. Sickening to think he used to be our hero, Zarkal said with a disdainful sneer. But then, he was already imprisoned before we even discovered his son wasn't just any ordinary body. He was a hurricane holder. And if we know anything about Thiath Vorgeth, it's that not even the gods are as vengeful as he is. And if you only took 1% of the genes in him, then with your potential, it's only a matter of time before we Nulls are burned to ashes from those flames of carnage flowing in both your bloods. So why not separate you instead? And fortunately for us, and unfortunately for you, another person was born with hurricane energy just at that same time. So you became disposable, he said, a mocking smirk curling on his lips. Now goodbye, Zarkal declared, as he detonated the hurricane energy he had deposited into Ryuk. Or at least, he tried to, until he watched Ryuk's dying expression slowly twist into an evil grin smile. Firstly, my heart is not on my left side. It's on my right. And secondly, you're a pathetic coward who crumbles under the slightest pressure, Ryuk said with a hollow grin. His right claws shifted to the side, and Zarkal's pupils dilated when he felt the hurricane energy he'd injected had been drained off, now fully converged into Ryuk's hand, which formed into a claw and then tore straight into his chest, bursting out from behind. If one looked from behind, they would notice Ryuk's hand tearing out of Zarkal's back, and within his palm a glowing dark core, as Ryuk withdrew his hand from Zarkal's chest, watching as he collapsed helplessly to the ground. The notification flashed right after. You have used the skill. Void Reversal Pulse. Every time you're struck, your body compresses the force and sends it back, stronger. Reflects 50% of the physical or energy damage taken. Can also store one attack and unleash it later in Void Amplification. This was Ryuk's hidden trump card. He had noticed a flaw in Zarkal, and that was, he got triggered by words far more than one would expect from a being such as him. He had noted it when he called Zarkal pathetic, since he could no longer make him feel fear. The Null Calamity had immediately tried to crush Ryuk with his aura, proving to Ryuk that he sucked at ignoring words. And that was why Ryuk had lulled him with the domain. He tried to fool Zarkal by wearing down his mental capacity, making him feel fear from bringing to words things such as dreams and goals. He knew if Zarkal had fused with one of his body parts and wanted his remaining body parts, then it was clear that he must have grand goals to desire that much power. And Ryuk had then planted the seed of a false slip-up. He had mentioned 3 seconds, just to make sure Zarkal would think he would attack in 3 seconds. And Ryuk had specifically called out 3 seconds, because that was the remaining time left for the 30 seconds of rewritten rule to be completed. After that 30 seconds, Ryuk's rule of light never existing would fade away, and Zarkal's vision would be restored. That had reignited Zarkal's confidence once more, and believing he was at the death's door from Ryuk's words, he had unleashed his ultimate card, which was the hurricane energy, blasting it through Ryuk's chest. And as for missing his Zarkal's core, Ryuk had purposely done that, but made it all seem like he had slipped up. All was done so he could get a few answers out from the Null Calamity, and everything worked out just as he planned. But it wasn't without a significant risk. And that was receiving the full power of Zarkul Ultimate card into his chest. But with the ability to store an incoming attack and amplify it by 50% later, Ryuk was never afraid of just one attack. Zarkul had unleashed hurricane energy into him and tried to detonate it to bring an end to his life. But Ryuk had secretly regathered everything into his claw and amplified it by 50% with the aid of his skills. And now, the living core of Zarkul rested in his hands, while the null calamity lay dying in the void, eyes widening in confusion and horror. But it was also quick to realize as it stared up in disbelief and anger. You set me up," it stated. But Ryuk didn't waste time. As he raised Zarkul's flickering core high into the air, his mouth widening into a monstrous maw before the core fell into his throat. "No!" An enraged roar erupted from Zarkul, surging with a speed and power that seemed beyond one half dead, reaching for its core, falling into Ryuk's throat, but was too slow. The core entered Ryuk's throat, and he swallowed it in one single gulp. In an instant, Zarkul's hand pulsed like a glyph before he slumped down beneath Ryuk's feet. His power core, that had housed his entire soul and energy, had been devoured by Ryuk, and he watched as Ryuk slowly crouched by the side of his head. Both eyes locked, and one brimmed with regret and sorrow of unfulfilled dreams, while the other brimmed with defiance. "In the end, you died in fear," Ryuk whispered to him, watching emotionlessly as the last bit of light in Zarkul's eyes faded away, but not without him muttering, "How long will you run from fate, little dark one?" "I'm not running from fate. I'm walking towards it. A fate where every single calamity like you ends up the same way, and every piece of my stolen body is recovered. Until then, I will continue." Ryuk's cold decree rang out as he watched the final flicker of life fade from the eyes of the seventh calamity. And now, there was nothing left but a skeleton floating before him. With the seventh calamity's death, its color began to shift. What was once a blackened skeletal frame slowly turned into a glowing blue-white hue, radiating an aura that pulsed outward with the same momentum as Ryuk's barely beating heart. But then Jai's crouched posture gave way, and he collapsed onto the bones below, right as the system notification flashed before his dimming eyes. The only message he could see before life slowly slipped away. "Host has exhausted remaining life energy due to accumulated injuries and overwhelming strain during the battle with the seventh calamity." "So I died, huh?" Ryuk mused as he descended into deep darkness. He could feel it now. There was almost no life aura left within him. Only the suffocating grip of darkness wrapped in a necrotic aura. In the end, he had fought bravely. He had faced the very thing that haunted his dreams. But to do so meant placing immense strain not only on his body, but on his soul too. Each attack from the seventh calamity wasn't just a physical strike. It was a law, one that tore away something fundamental within him. A law that could not be blocked, nor healed. He had broken through those devastating attacks with his overlap transformations and sheer, unrelenting will. But even that could only do so much when pitted against primordial abyssal laws. And now, both he and his enemy had given up the ghost. "Well, at least I died doing something I've always wanted to do," he thought, clinging to a small fragment of comfort. But he wasn't without regret. "I just wish I had more time to see them all. One last time. I have received the news, my lady." The words rang through the golden balcony, where a figure emerged from the void. Cloaked in flowing blue robes, the figure collapsed the moment he arrived. But just before he could fall to the side, a second presence caught him. A luminous figure cloaked entirely in golden motes of light. "Bob Khazir, what has come upon you?" the feminine voice asked, soft but trembling with suppressed fury. A golden flare surged through the balcony, doubling the radiance of the figure holding the man in blue. "Thank you for your kindness, my lady," Bob said, moving from her grasp to get on his knees. "Your body carries severe abyss energy wounds. Who amongst the nulls dared to lay hands on you?" the woman asked, her voice calm yet laced with wrath held tightly in check. "You need not concern yourself with that, my lady. It was the council. And I've heard they've imprisoned Thaithvorgeth in the Nihil, Arkansas. What? Her voice cracked through the air, sharp with disbelief. They've trapped Thaithvorgeth in the Nihil Ark? As impossible as it sounds, my lady, it's true. The Nulls have imprisoned your husband. And now they plan to finish what he should have ended long ago. They're coming to wage war against the dragons. But I fear their deeper intent lies with him, his royal prince, Ryuk. They're conspiring to seize his hurricane energy for themselves. I'm afraid we must leave at once, my lady. As he spoke, a blinding golden wave of aura erupted in the chamber. Then came the call, "O Eternals of Velmareth!" Her voice echoed like a divine decree, and instantly, 12 more golden lights descended into the room. Each figure stood upright, wings slightly spread, as they bowed to the commanding voice. "You have called for us, daughter of Velzaraka," they said in eerie unison. The golden figure turned again, but this time, she held an object wrapped in a blue dark shawl. She walked forward towards the blue-robed figure. "Here, Bobkazir. My lady. What are you doing?" His tone trembled, panic and disbelief clear in them. The woman raised her hand, her index finger resting gently on his forehead. A blue runic pentagon flared to life in his eyes. 3 silent seconds passed before her hand was withdrawn. The kneeling man rose to his feet like a puppet under divine command. "Now go," she said. Bob gave a final, respectful bow before stepping into the swirling void that materialized in front of him, disappearing with the wrapped object in his arms. Silence reigned in the room for a long moment before the golden woman whispered softly, "Go with him, Eternals of Velmareth. Ensure both are safe, at all costs." Her voice, though quiet, rang with unshakable authority. The Eternals stood in unison, arms crossed over their chests in salute, before turning and vanishing into the same portal, which sealed behind them. Just before it closed, the golden figure reached her hand toward it, touching its edge as it dissolved. A faint squeezing sound echoed as she slowly lowered her hand, before whispering a prayer into the vast chamber. "May the undying soul of Velzaraka be with you, little Draconis." Barely 5 seconds passed before another presence appeared in the hall, kneeling before her. "Your Highness, we've received news of the Nulls approaching from the Dominaire Guardians of the Seventh Gates. From the report of their sheer numbers, I'm afraid their mission, but they were cut off immediately. Prepare all 10,001 battalions," she commanded, "and bring me the Sword of Velzaraka." "The Sword of Velzaraka?" "Yes," she affirmed, her tone brimming with resolve and fiery anger. "Today, we dragons shall wage a war forever imprinted in time itself. Ryuk! Ryuk!" The call rang out, seemingly from an incredibly far distance. But then, it grew louder and louder, until his eyelids fluttered and finally opened. Immediately, they snapped shut again, unable to adjust to the intense brightness. But it only took a few minutes before the light was fully regulated, and his eyes opened completely. The scene was familiar yet confusing. For one, there were no longer 2 thrones, just a singular one at the center of the throne hall, which now seemed to have expanded in size by a factor of 5. Flickering golden-blue runes ran across the floor, and Ryuk looked down at himself. He was seated on the ground, back against the wall, but what seized the majority of his attention was his soul form. Previously, his legs and arms had turned pitch black, showing the absolute lack of life energy within them. But now, not only had they returned to their natural white, they were even flickering with a purple aura that radiated an incredible amount of life force. Strength bubbled within him in this renewed soul form. He hovered up from his sitting position before his gaze settled on 2 individuals who stood at the back of the throne, eyes turned toward him. "You defeated the 7th calamity." The words came, spoken in perfect unison by both of them. Ryuk hummed softly, almost inaudibly, before he turned his hands over, watching the flickering purple and white runes dancing around him. I thought I was too far gone to be saved, he muttered under his breath. But they heard his words and responded. You did lose your life aura, your heart, brain, and lungs. The body parts you had left lost their remaining life energy after the battle with the seventh calamity. You died, but collapsing upon your skeletal system, which still held its life energy. It fused with you and renewed your life force, reawakening your heart, lungs, and brain. Now you have 4 body parts in you, they explained. Ryuk slowly nodded before his fist clenched tightly in his hand, and he raised his gaze, silently staring up at the golden ceiling above him. A second chance, but my goal remains the same, he muttered before walking forward toward the throne, where the 2 Ryuks stood behind it. He took his seat. Immediately as he sat, a golden blue aura surged outward from the throne, passing through all of the runic lines on the ground and illuminating the entire soul world with a bountiful radiance. This time, the aura seemed to have true substance, one of harmony, unlike before when it had been divided between his 2 bloodlines. It was as if both bloodlines had finally come together, unified under his rule, something proven by the fact that they both stood behind him, while only he sat on the throne. How many years do I have now? He asked. Enough to not worry about it, the crimson-scaled Ryuk replied. Ryuk nodded gently before his head tilted to the side upon the throne, his soul body remaining seated. But then, it was a halo as the consciousness was gone, returning to the physical. A room of white, a bedroom to be exact, bathed entirely in pure white. In the corners, green crystals glowed, filled with an intense life and healing aura that saturated the space with vitality. At the center stood a bed, large enough for 3, and on it lay a young man with flowing white hair, his chest gently rising and falling. He wasn't alone in this white room. There was another presence. A girl sat beside the bed on a chair, her arms intertwined with his, her head resting against his hands. Her golden hair spread softly across his side. She appeared to be in a deep slumber just like him. But then, badump, the sound of a heartbeat thundered, loud and clear, awakening the golden-haired figure from her sleep. She slowly lifted her head, eyes fluttering open as she looked at the young man's steadily rising chest, then at his face. Shock flashed in her gaze as she saw his eyelids slowly flutter open. And then, shimmer. A powerful shimmer of blue and crimson light burst across the room, momentarily blinding her. But her eyes remained open, glassy, wide with disbelief. As the light eventually faded, his gaze shifted and settled on her. A flicker of surprise crossed Ryuk's eyes as he took in the sight of the girl, her cheeks streaked with tears. She suddenly leaned forward, arms wide, but Ryuk blinked, disappearing from the bed, and reappeared at the foot of it, leaving her to fall face first onto the mattress. She rose, her tears spilling as she turned to look at Ryuk, who now stood on his feet, facing her. His expression held no warmth, just a deep, unsettling coldness. Ryuk, I don't know you anymore. His voice was devoid of emotion, neither sorrow nor joy, not even anger, just nothingness. And with that, he turned, his hand reaching for the doorknob. A swift pull and the door creaked open. Wait, Ryuk? Her voice cracked behind him, but it faded into silence the moment Ryuk slammed the door shut. A shimmering white mist curled from his lips as he exhaled and turned to look ahead. But what he saw rooted him in place, his body unmoving. Before him was another room, blinding white, laced with gold. A medium-sized living room. But what seized his attention was the sight of a golden-haired woman resting her head on a man's shoulder, flicking through a few playing cards in her hands. What stunned Ryuk, however, wasn't her. It was the man she leaned against. That back, it reminded Ryuk of someone he had never thought he would see again. His lips trembled. Both figures seemed to sense his presence, as they turned their heads to look at him. And Ryuk stood frozen, disbelief clawing his existence. Hey, bloody mutt! Both of the people sitting on the sofa had turned to him, The golden-haired woman who rested her head on the man's shoulder was none other than the half-fallen one. The sight of her made Ryuk feel a fiery energy burst through his heart as a deep wave of anger began rising. But then it disappeared, replaced with disbelief when he saw who she was resting on. The one who had called him by a name only a few knew he even had, and he was none other than Blind Jack. Ryuk called in disbelief, his legs automatically moving toward him. But then he brought himself to a stop as he looked at the half-fallen one, a storm of conflicting emotions warping his expression. "You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't be with her of all people," he said. In an instant, a black hole spiraled out of Ryuk uncontrollably, and the entire building where they stood began to tremble from a sudden power. But then, Blind Jack blinked, appeared before Ryuk, and placed his palm gently on Ryuk's shoulder. "Come with me, and I'll explain it all, bloody mutt." "No!" Ryuk shot back, yanking his shoulder from Jack's grasp. "Explain it now. Explain how you're with the one who tried to murder me." His eyes turned into revolving black holes as the top of the building blew apart. The ground beneath them shattered under the pressure of his overwhelming aura. The half-fallen one was sent retreating backward from the immense wave of energy, her wings widening, golden aura flaring in resistance to the force. But she couldn't stop herself from being repeatedly driven back. The only one who remained standing was Blind Jack, whose gaze locked into Ryuk's spiraling eyes. It was clear they wouldn't give an inch if they received no explanation. He let out a long breath. "The half-fallen one is my wife," he said, stunning Ryuk into a frozen stupor. "And she never tried to kill you. It was all part of my ploy." The billowing aura faded as quickly as it had come, and the cold wind from the broken rooftop continued to whip through the building. Ryuk stood silently before Blind Jack. For a moment he tried to deny his existence. Perhaps the person before him was not Blind Jack. He looked too neat, too composed, far removed from the scrawny Corseller who once helped him escape from Grade E. But then, there was no denying it. This really was Blind Jack. Besides, Ryuk had eventually heard of Jack's identity after arriving here. One of the 5 fallen geniuses of the fallen family who disappeared 50 years ago. And now here he was, declaring the one who had once tried to kill him as his wife, and claiming it had all been a ploy. Step. The sound of rushing footsteps echoed from below as Ryuk looked down and saw the fallen armies rapidly advancing due to the chaos. But then Jack's voice reached him first. "If you can just come with me, I can explain everything better. Trust me," he said, reaching a hand forward toward Ryuk. Ryuk stared at it suspiciously but didn't take it, slowly levitating off the ground. "Come with me," he ordered, before bursting into the sky and vanishing into the distance without another word. Without wasting a second, Blind Jack followed after his afterimage, both becoming bolts of blue and gold that rapidly disappeared across the horizon. "They're leaving. Quickly after them," a voice echoed from the fallen soldiers as they prepared to chase the fleeing beams. But then, a command rang out, halting them in their tracks. "Leave both alone, and call the builders to fix the destroyed building," she said. The fallen auras nodded their heads before quickly disappearing. A few seconds after they were gone, Morgaine finally burst through the aura lock on the door of the room, stepping into an utterly chaotic scene. "What happened? Where is father?" she asked. The half-fallen one looked into the sky where they had both vanished. "He'll be returning soon," she said to Morgaine, whose gaze sharpened as she looked in the same direction. "Either dead or alive." Ryuk soared through the air, but not for long, as he soon arrived above a vast blue sea. He landed on its surface, and ice quickly rippled forth from his touch, completely solidifying the area beneath him for about a kilometer in radius. Not long after, another figure descended behind him. Blind Jack, I know, was a core buyer in Grade E, running a business of gathering cores from hunters and paying them for it. Ryuk's voice rang out first as he slowly turned toward the man before him. "He helped me with a card that allowed me to leave the prison called Grade E and venture into the outside world. all for the sake of making me accomplish my goal to avenge his old friend and my uncle. But when I reached grade B, I learned Blind Jack is actually one of the lost geniuses of the fallen angels, one who had been presumed dead for decades. And now, after I woke up, he's somehow become the husband of the half-fallen one. A lady who, at first, seemed like she wanted nothing but to see me grow. And just when I trusted her, she turned on me and tried to end my life. So tell me, Jack, which of these versions of old Jack should I believe? Which one is true? His voice held a tightly controlled blend of rage and restraint. Blind Jack's features tightened for a moment before he responded. I'll let you decide that for yourself, he said. Then Ryuk watched as his humanoid form began to peel away, revealing a bizarre creature he had seen once before. It was a humanoid being of gold and black, with a singular eye that stretched across his face, gleaming with ancient, divine light. But most eye-catching was his grin, a grin that seemed imprinted into his existence. And this image was none other than the same creature Ryuk had faced during the adventurer's test. I am a true fallen, he said, towering above Ryuk by more than 2 heads in his Aurelus form. Then, his hands stretched outward as a ball of dark cube appeared in his grasp. One of the powers of being a true fallen is this ability, divination. The ability to see into the future on a single important topic. I divined this 50 years ago when I tried to see how Indurtha's war with the Nulls would go, and this dark cube holds the vision I saw back then. In it lies the answer to all you need to know, he said as Ryuk watched the glowing cube float towards him, and in an instant, the golden panel flashed. Host has come across a future vision cube, an invaluable artifact capable of storing a divined future that may or may not be true. The host only needs to grab hold of the cube to see the vision stored within. The system prompt appeared as Ryuk stared at the floating cube. He turned his suspicious gaze to old Jack, who simply looked down with his solemn golden eyes. But eventually, he raised his hand and gently grabbed the cube with both hands. The cube flashed a soft layer of color for a few seconds. Then it lit up with a fierce light that concentrated directly on Ryuk's eyes. 7 fate scenes flickered rapidly across Ryuk's vision, and just after 30 seconds, the cube dimmed and faded into nothing while Ryuk took 3 steps back, inhaling and exhaling heavily as memories flashed through his head. Seems like you've seen it all, Blind Jack said before continuing. As you can see, the vision displayed all plausible ways for the apocalypse to end. 21 of the visions showed the destruction of Endearth, and only one showed how Endearth could be saved. You can guess. It was hella confusing at first. But the one that had shown how Endearth succeeded is very similar to how things have unfolded in your life until now. Your appearance in grade E. You exchanging cores and familiarizing yourself with me. Uncle Bob's death and you leaving grade B with the card I gave you. Your love with Morgaine, and how it waned. Your anger and pain, and your final war with Zarkul, the calamity. Most of everything, Ryuk. Most of everything that has happened, right from when you first laid eyes on me in grade E, up until your defeat of Zarkul. It was all foreseen, he said, as Ryuk's eyebrows twitched in shock and confusion. All defined by the vision I saw 50 years ago. Old Jack completed as Ryuk went through the scenes in his head once more. It was a total of 21 visions. Each showed how Endearth lost to the Nulls, how all life was wiped out, leaving a barren world. 15 of those 20 visions had Ryuk in them. They showed everything playing out, a future, but something always went wrong in the end, and he eventually died at the hands of Zarkul, the 7th calamity. Some showed him never leaving grade E and dying a nobody. Others depicted him never meeting the Half-Flame One and ending up a struggling slave at the Ascension Academy, only to be killed and devoured by Zarkul. One version depicted him failing to grow stronger because his love for Morgaine never waned. When Zarkul arrived, he was too weak and completely destroyed, losing his life and everything he had ever cared about. But just one vision, only one, was different. Only one had shown him surviving. Only one had shown him defeating Zarkul. And that vision had gone almost exactly as Ryuk had lived up until now. At least the most important bits of it, Meeting old Jack. Trusting him. Receiving the card. Meeting the half-fallen one. Being betrayed by the half-fallen one. Every single pain. Every single factor was exactly as divined by that last vision. You orchestrated everything. Yes, yes, I did, old Jack said, not denying a single word. It was all too late for that anyway. My disappearance 50 years ago, it wasn't an accident like the world thought. I disappeared after I saw the vision, went from being an anomaly genius of the fallen angels to becoming a low-life bartender in Grade E. It was all part of my goal to make the vision of Endearth surviving the nulls a reality. While I didn't foresee Bob's death, I knew a situation would arise where I could send you to Grade B. So you giving me that card wasn't just kindness. It was all part of your ploy for me to meet Half-Fallen One and gain admission to the Ascension Academy. Ryuk mused under his breath. Yes, and even though I never told the Half-Fallen One about the vision back then, I predicted her reaction if she sees the exact type of card I gave to you, and it all worked out exactly as planned. I saw your love with Morgaine, my daughter, and I also saw that even though you and Morgaine had a great relationship, it was one of 10 paths that ended with your loss to Zarkul, the 7th calamity, and you saw it too. It was like a curse, where love became your downfall. If it's left to grow, then everything you, Endearth, me, Morgaine herself will all be lost. That was why I reappeared to the Half-Fallen One. I showed her the future, just like I've shown you now, and she understood it and followed my commands, to create friction between the relationship between you and Morgaine, to halt the love. And I believe you already knew how she did that, he said, as Ryuk's heart pounded, and he asked, and her placing a death bounty on my head? Was that all part of your ploy, too? He asked, and he replied, I commanded her to place a death bounty on your head just after your relationship with her and Morgaine waned, in order to channel even more anger and pain, to grow you into the only version of Ryuk that can defeat Zarkul, he declared, as Ryuk's expression twisted with fury. It was like he had been a game piece, a character moved on a chessboard by the figure before him. You played me like a puppet, all for a vision. When I thought I had a family, when I thought I belonged, when I thought someone finally cared, you came and tore it all apart? Just for a vision? He asked in disbelief as Blind Jack sighed. Yes, yes, I played you like a chessboard. I did everything to ensure you became the Ryuk I saw in the vision. And what Ryuk was that? That was never me. That was the Ryuk you and your damn vision orchestrated. Ryuk shot back, as Blind Jack scoffed back. You think a Ryuk who felt himself already part of a loving family defeated Zarkul? You think a Ryuk under the influence of the emotion of love and the peace it brings along with it could have defeated Zarkul? The Ryuk who defeated Zarkul in my vision was a tired, broken, and angered Ryuk. A Ryuk who felt lost and unaccepted. A Ryuk confused and believed to be hated. A Ryuk that had been through pain and saw the only meaning to life being strength. And all I did was simply make sure you were that Ryuk. You? Ryuk tried to muster, yet no words came from his mouth as his teeth ground against each other, nails digging into his palms. Blind Jack. He had been there ever since Ryuk could remember growing up. He had always been the only one he could trust after his uncle. He had always been a close friend to them, like family. But now, hearing that all of those memories were planned, all from a vision he had 50 years ago, he no longer knew what to feel. The realization that all of those memories were fake. Old Jack! You bastard! Ryuk roared, a sickening crunch resonating from his clenched teeth as he slowly stretched his hand toward Old Jack. Immediately, the Fallen tried to move to dodge the strike, but it was never meant to be a strike. A single dark sigil appeared in Ryuk's palm, followed by a world-ending suction force. Old Jack felt himself whipped forward at terrifying speed. His face slammed into Ryuk's palm, whose hands smoldered with darkness as claws rigidly tore through flesh, tightening their grip on his skull. Of all the people I expected to be fake, you were the last, Ryuk forced out through gritted teeth. his voice trembling beneath fury as he watched golden claws cleave toward his heart, yet halted just before they could touch. Kaboom! An incredibly defiant explosion erupted, tearing a crater into the sea they both stood upon. Old Jack was roughly slammed into the ground, uncontrollable gasps of pain leaving his lips, but he had barely a second before Ryuk's foot smashed into his chest, blasting him deeper into the earth. Ryuk didn't follow. Instead, he reached his hands toward the abyss as Old Jack came flying backward toward him. Silently, his golden claws cleaved forward toward Ryuk's face, but when they collided, clang! It was the sound of metal crashing against metal. A spark flew across Ryuk's cheek, but then Old Jack's eyes widened when he saw not a single scratch on Ryuk's face. It was like he had struck a metal block instead. Boom! A punch slammed into his face, his skull sinking inward as he soared backward with blazing speed, slamming into the ground a couple more times before coming to a screeching stop. But once more, Ryuk stretched out his hand toward him. A sigil appeared again, and with it came the same horrific force that dragged Old Jack back. He tried to retaliate, but all he got was another brutal punch crashing into his stomach. Blood burst forth like showers, only to be dragged back against the current as Ryuk cleaved through his shoulders with another strike. For the next few seconds, all that followed was destruction and gasps of agony. And after just 10 seconds, a figure now lay limply in Ryuk's palm, both feet dangling in the air. One arm ripped off, clothing reduced to tatters, as cracks sundered through his fallen form. "Give me a reason not to end you right now," Ryuk said coldly, his hands moving behind him, morphing into a claw glowing with purplish energy. "I had no choice," Old Jack forced out from between the gaps of his teeth, but it only made Ryuk's jaw clench harder. "So all you did was pretend. You became friends with my uncle. You became the only one he could trust with me. He believed in you. And how did you repay that trust? Treating us like characters to be controlled." Ryuk barked out, slamming him into the ground, shattering it for miles on end as Old Jack sputtered blood from the corner of his lips, lying broken within the cracks. "Bob knew," he said, and Ryuk unconsciously paused before a new vein of rage exploded in him. "Liar. If Bob knew I was nothing but a chess piece on your board, he would have killed you himself." "No, he knew. He might not have known I'd become a thorn in your life. He might not have known I'd make it hard, all for you to succeed. But I know he knew. He could see my world, and he understood. He was farsighted, unlike you," Old Jack said, a mocking laugh echoing as Ryuk raised his legs and smashed them into his ribs, slowly inching toward his beating heart. Broken pieces of the ribs scraped over the beating object as even more blood poured from Old Jack's lips. "My uncle would have ended you in a blink if he knew what you were really up to. He must have seen that you were trying to help me. He must have seen that you loved to watch me grow. But he could never have known why. How you orchestrated my life to become more painful, just so I could face Zarkul. Don't pretend you knew him better than I did. You don't." Ryuk shut back. "You're right. He never knew my end goal was for you to face Zarkul. He truly never saw the vision," Old Jack said, as Ryuk clicked his tongue. "But if he were here right now, he would have understood that I had no choice." "Liar. You did have a choice. You could have gotten stronger. You could have gone through that pain yourself and faced Zarkul on your own. You could have saved the world if you trained hard enough. But you didn't, because all you saw was a vision of hardship, because you were a coward. Instead, you passed it all to me. Don't give me that bullshit that you had no choice. I saw no vision of difficulty," Old Jack whispered out, coughing blood as he did. "All I saw in my future was death. I was the supreme genius of the Fallens, one with the purest bloodline, a true Fallen. I believed I was going to be the hero that saves the world, the one to end the Nulls. But then, I obtained divinity and divined 100 different futures. 100 different outcomes towards the moment I tried to become the hero I believed I was meant to be. And in every single one, I died. I was never fated to defeat Zarkul. No matter how hard I trained, no matter how far I pushed myself, I died to him in every timeline. The only outcome that led to success was an outcome where you were involved. And hence I had two choices. The first choice I had was to remain headstrong and tell myself I am the hero. To train hard, to work hard like you said. But I knew fate would never change. In the end, I would only be destroyed by Zarkul. Something the young, hot-blooded me would have been absolutely fine with. Dying to someone truly powerful. But then, I realized my stubbornness wouldn't just be the death of me. It would drag along the entirety of Endearth. The young, the old, the innocents, all dead due to my stubbornness. Or I could accept that I was never meant to be the hero. To accept my fate as a nobody, and instead focus everything I had on you. You who held a chance, even if slight. In the end, I choose to cast aside my pride as a prodigy and step down for you, he said, but Ryuk only scoffed. TCH, fate, fate, fate. The same word is uttered by losers all year round. All I hear are excuses for incompetence. A reason not to try harder, he said, pressing harder into old Jack's chest. But it was as though the old man could no longer hear his words, muttering distantly to himself. You said I shied away from difficulty? Ha ha ha. He laughed mockingly. What part of my life wasn't hard after that divination? I had just begun to settle, to build a life with the one I loved. I was close to becoming a father. But for you, no, for Endearth, I left all of that behind. In the vision, I understood that the pain of love was what spurred your growth the most. I figured you worked in some specific way under the effect of love, almost like a curse itself. And I understood. The only love I could control was if you loved my own daughter, and not someone else. And for that, I poisoned my lover, he said. Ryuk's eyes widened in stunned disbelief, instinctively taking a step back from him. You did what? I poisoned the half-fallen one. A drug that delayed her ability to give birth. Morgan was supposed to be born 31 years ago, but I delayed it with a drug, to make sure that when she came into the world, she'd be your age, to be able to control that factor of love. Or you might say, to be able to break your heart. Ha ha ha. But I left my lover alone, with no answers to where I was. I poisoned her, and throughout the 18 years of my daughter's life, I never showed up. She never had a father, and I stood coldly by, watching silently as all of my pieces fell into place. All of it was part of the chessboard too. All of this was to make sure you would grow into the man fate required. To ensure Zarkul was defeated and the world saved. And you think I shy away from difficulty? Tell me, what difficulty do you know of that is greater than turning your own family into pawns, just to save the world? Give me one, bloody mutt, he demanded, voice hoarse with conviction, as Ryuk looked on, stunned. You're a monster, Ryuk whispered, watching old Jack amid the blood spilling from his mouth. Only now could he truly begin piecing it all together, and the only conclusion he had was that this man was a monster. If he truly was in love with the half-fallen one, and as she had stated, he had been missing for 50 years, then it all aligned. But then, if 50 years had passed since old Jack disappeared, and somehow 30 years later, still during old Jack's disappearance, she gave birth to Morgan. Just who was Morgan's father? Did the half-fallen one get remarried? Ryuk had never seen Morgan mention that before. He had always assumed her father was probably dead. But when he woke up and saw had tilted to him so tenderly back then, it was love. And that meant old Jack was the half-fallen's partner. If she gave birth to Morgan after not seeing old Jack for nearly 50 years, then it must mean her pregnancy had somehow been delayed by over 3 decades. And this was done by old Jack to ensure Morgan would be roughly the same age as he was, keeping that factor of love under his control. In the end, old Jack had turned his own family into pawns on a chessboard to create the Ryuk standing here today. He had left his position as a genius and the lover of the Queen of the Fallens just to become a core seller in a place like Grady. all just to make sure his vision came to pass to create the Ryuk who would defeat Zarkul. It was madness, pure madness, all for a single vision that could have easily gone wrong with any factor misplacing. To sacrifice being a good lover, a good father, and a race's prodigy. If one could just train hard and achieve the same goal, then why would any sane man choose this path? Why would he turn his life upside down, just to ensure the vision came true, if he could have just trained hard for it? You know, there used to be something I never believed in, Ryuk. Karma, he said suddenly, drawing Ryuk's full attention. What goes around comes around. And now I see it's true. I sacrificed everything to defeat Zarkul. I sacrificed everything to save End-Earth from destruction. And now I will be sacrificed too, by the hands of the monster I bred. But it's fine. This should be punishment enough. For forcing so many people into my ploy, without ever asking for their thoughts or permission. This must be karma. A pity I never saw it coming like this. Maybe then, I would have done things differently, he said, as more blood spilled from his mouth and his eyes slowly rolled to the back of his head. He'll die in 10 seconds. The system notification flashed before Ryuk's gaze as he watched old Jack's breathing slow, and his breath slowly halting within him. A single question raged through him. To make old Jack live, or to just let him die? I'm curious what you guys' opinions are. Should old Jack live or die? Old Jack slowly went still, but before he could completely go silent, a single bottle appeared in Ryuk's hands as he poured the contents down old Jack's lips. A violent gasp surged from him, his eyes snapping open, dazed and wide with confusion. Ryuk watched, heart pounding, as the man reverted to his human form. His broken ribs and fractured bones realigned, and the wounds on his body began to heal. You! Why? He asked Ryuk, who took a seat beside him. Why? He asked himself silently, his gaze drifting to his hands, before he sighed. Why had he decided to save old Jack in the end? Firstly, it was because old Jack had sacrificed everything. His love, his freedom, even his daughter's happiness, for the sake of a vision he believed would save the world. He had endured years of pain, guilt, and isolation just to protect others. That, in itself, was heroic in intention. In a way, it was safe to say he had played the villain in everyone's story so they could be the heroes in theirs. If he had never sacrificed all of this, if he had left everything to fate, then Ryuk would never have gotten that card that allowed him to leave Grade E, nor would he have met the Half-Fallen One, nor entered the Ascension Academy. One could say fate might have found another way, and he might have grown strong regardless, but would he have grown strong enough to reach Zarkul's level in such a short time frame, all on his own? If old Jack had done nothing but watch, distant and undecided, not interfering because he was too scared, then the only fate that would have come upon the world was its destruction. And if the world had a chance of being saved by a single person making that same sacrifice, then, at the point when the Nulls are feasting on Endiarthians, turning the world into a dark Gomer, who wouldn't take that sacrifice? What was the weight of love and manipulation in the face of planetary annihilation? So, for that reason, one couldn't say old Jack completely deserved death. But that didn't mean he was pure either. He was far from it. He had robbed his daughter of her free will, poisoning her, dictating her fate. That's not nobility. That's domination. He treated people like pieces on a chessboard, including Ryuk and his own family. For that, one couldn't say he was wholly noble. But then again, was death really the punishment he deserved after all he sacrificed? Was simply ceasing to exist enough? Death is not the best punishment for you, Ryuk muttered as old Jack fully healed and slowly sat up, resting on his hands. Not after that much sacrifice. In the end, as much as I hate to admit it, you were Endertha's hero. The only one who saw its destruction and gave everything to prevent it. Your actions weren't noble, but your intentions were. To make a small group suffer to save billions. I've always wanted to save End-Earth, too, maybe just the humans at first. But then, End-Earth needed to be rid of the Nulls. But not even I could have done what you did, if I were in your shoes. I never would have believed in fate. I would have simply done what I know best. Train harder and harder, hoping fate would be forced to give me a better choice. But it was just as you said. That was too risky. If fate proved true in the end, the blame would have fallen on my shoulders, and I'd live a life of regret. Of being the one responsible for the slaughter of billions. That kind of blame, I would never be able to bear, he muttered, finishing his thoughts. And maybe Uncle Bob would have agreed, he added, drawing old Jack's attention. Perhaps he would have said it was okay if he had seen what I gained at the end of it all, as I'm closer to my own goals, too, only because you set fate in motion. So death isn't a fitting karma. If there's a fitting karma, it's learning to live with the ones you've hurt, and becoming better for them, he murmured quietly. Old Jack turned to face the deep blue sea, staring silently for a long while. Because, somehow, a part of him believed that death wasn't a punishment. It was mercy. One might ask why he believed death was mercy, especially after he had sacrificed everything and won in the end. So why not rebuild now? Why not become a father again? But that, he didn't believe was possible. Because guilt had become his new identity. He believed he needed to suffer. He had hurt his daughter. He had manipulated Ryuk. He had caused deaths, even if it was to defeat Zarkul. He was never there for his wife, nor for his child. He wasn't there to protect them, not when they needed him the most. Could he still claim to be worthy of being a father, a lover, or ever being one? Even though the world had been saved through his ploy, he knew well that forgiveness is a luxury he no longer has the right to ask for. Besides, even though he had built the future, set the stage for it, he never saw himself in it, because he had always thought, one could I save the world, but the truth, I never learned how to live in it. You're the one meant to lead now, Ryuk, old Jack voiced out, turning his attention to him. And Morgaine deserves a future without the shadow of my past. I don't deserve them all. I truly don't, he murmured as Ryuk shook his head. You only saw my fate on Endearth. You never saw my true fate, Ryuk said, and old Jack's brows knit, puzzled. Endearth is just a starting point for me. My journey is still far from over. Still too far. There's no such thing as me being the one to lead now, for I'm just the silhouette of a traveler, my descent but a passing. I will leave Endearth soon. No. I will leave Endearth now. And only someone like you can lead Endearth to greatness. Only a hero like you, he said with calm conviction. Old Jack paused mid-step, before a soft smile spread across his weathered face. It's like you see your fate too. Like you know it, and you know it won't be easy, he said as Ryuk exhaled a breath and shrugged. The fate of us, anomalies, is never easy. Let me guess, you saw in the vision that the end battle would happen in Grade E, right? Ryuk asked as old Jack nodded his head. So you evacuated them? Or were they all slaughtered by the nulls that descended on Grade E? He asked, and he replied. They were evacuated. All of them, he said, and Ryuk unconsciously exhaled a sigh of relief. When he had arrived in Grade E back then, he had not sensed a single different soul apart from the nulls, and he had thought they had probably all been slaughtered by them. But to hear they had been evacuated was quite the relief. But aren't they all prisoners? Where are they now? He asked as old Jack shrugged. The ones that aren't human among them have returned to their worlds, and the humans are being given a new chance at life, although under very strict watchings, he said as Ryuk nodded, though his brow lifted slightly at the words. Returned to their world? I don't understand. Like returned to their cities or something? He asked, but old Jack shook his head. No, they have been, he was saying when, vroom. Suddenly, a bright wave of light shot into the distant sky, seizing Ryuk's attention as he turned toward the northern horizon. His gaze shimmered with astonished light as he noticed Endiarthians rising within the billowing pillar of energy, disappearing into what seemed to be a crack that had opened in the sky. What is that? He muttered aloud, as old Jack turned his attention too, though with noticeably less surprise. That is the portal to their worlds. I don't know how, But just after you defeated Zarkul, a rift tore out through the entire world, appearing in all the skies. Then the footage of a figure concealed in milky white light that hid his features appeared. His words summarized that anyone of any race who wished to return to their true world could do so through one of the 7 runic portals situated across all the grades. You do know, apart from the humans, the other races don't belong to Endearth, right? He asked, and Ryuk nodded. Yes, I heard they were all brought here. And according to Aster, she stated something similar. Something along the lines of them being transported back once they completed their mission. I just never thought it would actually happen, he said, slowly nodding. All of the other races in Grade E have already left for their true worlds. And most people are deciding to return back as well, instead of staying here on Endearth, he added, as Ryuk's gaze gleamed thoughtfully. Finally, the control of Endearth will return to the humans. Just what Mad White was fighting for. He thought silently to himself, before his mind turned again. That reminds me of him, Mad White. I wonder if he's still in his castle. He pondered inwardly before voicing it. So, it's all over now? The war, the deaths, the lower races' subjugation by the 10 families. Everyone's returning, and it's all over? He asked, as old Jack nodded slowly. It's over, Ryuk. The chaos is all over. The death of Zarkul brought an end to it all. And you never have to worry about the Nulls reappearing. Because 2 months ago, they descended once again onto Endearth. They called themselves emissaries of the celestial races and marked Endearth to under their watch now. You could say, the humans can finally get a breather, he muttered, as Ryuk stood in reflective silence for a long moment before smiling faintly. It was worth it. It was worth it once more. He mused to himself, before old Jack's attention turned to him. When will you be leaving, Ryuk? He asked, as Ryuk turned to him before replying. Now, he replied, locking eyes with him before he was asked. Can I ask you for just one more favor? Please remain with Morgaine. For just a while. He begged, but Ryuk's eyes only furrowed. Did you ever tell her that all the love we shared was a set-up ploy of yours? Yes, I did. 2 months ago. And what did she say about that? He asked as he turned away. Nothing. She said nothing. But her actions were louder. For the 4 months you remained in slumber, she had been by your side every single day. She never stepped out of that room. Not even once. It might all be fake. You might feel it's all fake, since it was essentially set up. But right now, it's more real to Morgaine than I ever could be. If you leave now, I'm afraid she would never be the same, he said, as Ryuk's eyes narrowed with a mix of conflict and pain. I thought she was never there when I needed her the most, he muttered, as old Jack shook his head. All that happened was never her choice. Many times she tried to leave the castle, but was held back by her mother. She was essentially imprisoned there, never allowed to leave. It was never because she didn't want to help, or just coldly watched from the throne as you suffered and did nothing. She just couldn't do anything, even when she tried to. If anything, I should be the one to be blamed for it all, he whispered. So please, remain for some time at least. One last meeting, if you will, he pleaded, as Ryuk looked on quietly before rising to his feet. I guess she deserves some explanation too, he said, and old Jack watched him stand before rising as well. Then come, be my guest, he said, as they both floated up into the sky, turning into beams of light that pierced the air, moving back toward the direction of the eclipsed citadel. I am sorry, half-fallen one. The words rang out in a dining room that pulsed with warmth. At a golden marble table built to seat a family, for seats were occupied by 4 individuals. They were none other than old Jack seated at one end, with the half-fallen one directly opposite him. Ryuk sat beside old Jack, across from Morgaine, who was seated next to the half-fallen one. Dishes were arranged neatly before the group, who ate in solemn silence until finally, he decided to break the faint pressure in the room. I remember my words back then. I believed it went something like, You don't actually want the kind who is nothing but a human to be uncontrollable, do you? Or you don't even want a king at all. After all, the Fallens only have a queen and not a king, right? I guess that must have been hurtful. Ryuk muttered silently as the half-fallen one shook her head. No. What must have been more hurtful was turning on you the way I did. I could see you had your trust placed in me back then. Back at that dinner. I could see you look at me as more than just the half-fallen one. And then I did that. Essentially stabbed you in the back, ripping apart the look from your eyes. I settled for Jack's ploy and floated along with it, even calling for a death bounty on your head. All you did was react to a betrayal, and under such severe emotions, we all can act unpredictably. But that moment of weakness doesn't define anyone. So we are the ones that are sorry for how we treated you in the past. Turning you into a character piece without ever trusting your will. Even though every one of my words back then, I never meant to say as I was under the possession of this dickhead, she said, turning to look at old Jack with a fiery intensity as the man lowered his head to the table, avoiding her gaze. Still, I want to say I'm very sorry, Ryuk Null, she said, as his breath hitched before he eventually exhaled. I understand, he replied almost silently. The words that night had stung Ryuk. They had left him shattered, feeling betrayed. He could never believe the half-fallen one could have uttered those words and made those decisions. It was very unexpected, too impromptu. But now, to hear that she never meant those words, and it was all due to old Jack's ploy, it left him not knowing what to feel. He wanted to say he had forgiven her, but how could he forgive when the pain of those words still scarred his heart? It would just be a lie, and in the end what he could only agree to was that he at last understood the reason for her actions. It's fine. I also never expected to be forgiven so quickly, and I'd rather be hit with the truth than comforted with a lie, she suddenly said, as Ryuk turned his gaze up. I forgot you can read minds, he replied as she grinned. I've met you quite a few times now, but the only time I ever read your mind was twice. You were always more than conscious about what you think about in my presence, and most of the times your mind is usually sealed shut. I guess that is understandable now, since all you were trying to do was simply protect your identity, she said as Ryuk paused, turning to look at her in shock. She continued eating, but she paused when she felt his gaze as she asked, What? My identity? He asked and she nodded. Yes, you being a null and all, she replied, as Ryuk's brows lifted in sharp surprise. I guess you've always been trying to hide that. I never knew you knew that. When did you know that? He asked and she shrugged her shoulders. Kirin suspected it after you left. But then, I thought over my actions and discovered that they were my deepest, darkest thoughts, which were never meant to surface. Something must have surfaced them, magnified them to very high levels, resulting in me lashing out. Once I figured that out, I knew only one person had that mind ability. And I discovered the dickhead was responsible for it all. But to be honest, I've always suspected there was something different about you. You're definitely no ordinary human, that I know for sure. But I knew secrets could only be held secret for so long anyway, so I never bothered much to think about it, she said, but Ryuk still didn't feel his heart settle. And now that you know I'm a null? I don't know? Don't find that detestable? He asked as she shook her head. Only an idiot would still think you're one of those monsters after seeing all you have done. Your actions since the Null War began already revealed whose side you're on. Null or not, actions matter. And you've made yours pretty clear. So you might be a null, physiologically or something along that line. But you're not a monster, and you are on Indurtha's side. That's clear enough and all we need, she explained as Ryuk's hand holding the cutlery shook a bit, unconsciously let go of it, his hand clenching into a fist. I was always afraid of what you would say. I was always afraid of you asking, of her asking what I truly am, and what her reaction would be if she discovered I'm one of those detestable beings. It was why I never came back, Ryuk muttered as silence descended into the room, the dining room coming to a stop, It was why I always ran from it all and never showed up, he said, as his aura began unconsciously spilling out once more. But before it got out of control, he was grabbed tightly by old Jack, and his fist slowly unclenched, his aura dispersing. And you were right to think that, Ryuk. Common sense is not common, and those higher-ups are more stupid than pigs. If they had learned you were a null, irrespective of your actions, they would have torn it apart and pinned it to your face, labeling you a monster. So you were not wrong to be afraid. You were not wrong for running away, he said, affirmed. Just know we're not one of those dumb idiots. We won't see you as a monster, just because you happen to have the blood of one flowing through your veins. Your actions speak louder than that, and we believe in that only, he said, his words clear, filled with not the slightest sense of doubt. And when his gaze turned to look around the room, he could sense the feeling was mutual. Thank you, he whispered silently, as old Jack tapped him on the back twice before he took his entire meal in a single gulp and rose to his feet. I just remembered, Ryuk. I had something important to say to Astralinia, he said, as Ryuk watched him signal a finger to the half-fallen one whose eyes glinted as she too rose up. That reminds me, too. Hope you don't mind the abrupt leaving, Ryuk, she said as Ryuk shook his head. It's fine, really, he said, watching the pair disappear down the hall, soon fading off from view. And that was when he returned to his eating. But then the realization hit him when he unconsciously turned to the other table where Morgaine sat, and their eyes crossed as they hurriedly looked away. Tsh, that bastard set me up. Silence. And a question. What to say? Ryuk had no idea what to say, for he had many things to say, but no idea where to start. An apology? It sounded like a good starting point, but he didn't even know how to begin it. And strangely, a part of him didn't want to begin with an apology at all. Whether his heart didn't want to apologize at all, or simply didn't want the conversation to begin with an apology, he had no idea. So he simply continued eating. Morgaine's situation wasn't much different. She longed to speak, for her heart overflowed with words. But sadness thrummed through her chest with every passing second of silence, for doubt still lingered within her. She hadn't seen him for a year, and when she finally did, his eyes remained closed for 4 more months. Yet, when he finally opened them, she could still feel that gaze. It was the stare of someone who had braved a storm and returned. Changed. A gaze stripped of its light. Eyes that had lost their hope. Cold. Distant. Almost alien. And the words that followed, his first in over a year and 4 months, were even colder. I don't know you anymore. So the silence stretched on, unbroken, until he finished the meal in front of him and rose to leave. She didn't stop him. And silently, he disappeared through the dining hall's exit. When Ryuk stepped out of the dining room, he took a random direction and walked quietly down the corridor. A few thoughts crept into his mind, biting cold whispers, but he brushed them aside. Soon, he came upon a door at the far end of the long corridor. Without thinking, he approached it and reached for the knob. He grabbed and twisted, unlocking the door before stepping in. Flap. Instantly, the wind howled around him, tugging at his shirt with wild force. He had arrived at the top of the castle, a wide, open rooftop. Unconsciously, he paused as the memories returned. This was the same place. The last place before I left for the Ascension Academy, he murmured, taking gentle steps forward until he reached the golden railings. His hand stretched outward, fingers brushing against the familiar cold iron. He raised his head toward the sky, eyes softening as he felt it familiar. The eclipsed citadel, home of the fallen angels, was a place of eternal twilight. The moon, the stars, the dancing green auroras. The sky was a perpetual blend of illuminated night, shimmering in constant, melancholic beauty. I've come a long way from then, he mused, a faint smile curving his lips. In a blink, he was seated atop the railings. Arms resting on his lap, he gazed out over the city. It was quite the view. But then, footsteps echoed behind him. Someone was approaching, but he didn't turn his head. He simply remained still, his head tilting slightly in the direction of the wind. Unconsciously, eventually the figure arrived beside him. A rustle of hair brushed against his skin. His eyes slowly opened, and the first thing he saw was that golden gaze. "Morgaine," he said. Though his voice was little more than a whisper, it rang out clearly in her ears. Her heart pounded in her chest at the sound of his voice, for it felt like more than a name, felt like a plea for help. Without thinking, her hand reached out, gently caressing the side of his face. A single tear traced down her right cheek. "I'm here, Ryuk," she said, but her hand, trembling from the rush of emotion, inadvertently pushed with more force than she intended. She watched in horror as he lost his balance and fell from the railings. A faint gasp escaped her lips as she recoiled in shock. But then his hand reached toward her. Without hesitation, she lunged forward, stretching out her own hand to grab him. They missed by a mere inch, and she watched him fall. But not for long. She jumped after him. Both of them soared downwards from a height of nearly 600 meters, falling, yet somehow always just a centimeter apart. "I'm always here," she whispered, her voice reaching his face. Their breaths touched, one cold, one warm, brushing against their skin and sending a rush down both their spines. Then she leaned forward, mid-air, and their lips met. For a second, the world stood still. Two souls, locked in a freefall of blooming love. A fall to certain death made beautiful, so much so that time itself seemed to pause to watch the scene. That kiss, in that moment, silenced the chaos inside both minds. They felt anchored, held together by something more than gravity. And yet, it wasn't enough. They wanted more. Ryuk moved first, his hands slipping around her waist, pulling her close against his chest. They felt each other's warmth. And for that fleeting moment, it was enough. The world could spiral into chaos. The skies could fall. The mountains could shatter. But to remain in each other's arms was enough. Until they continued to plummet, faster, closer to the ground. And then, vroom, the air flapped, a golden shimmer exploded around. Two golden wings unfurled. From which of them it was hard to tell. The wings wrapped around them, spinning faster and faster, as they shut down before reversing their trajectory in a smooth arc. A U-shaped dive that carried them back into the sky. Some of the fallen below caught a glimpse of it, though it happened so quickly they squinted, unsure whether it had been an illusion or reality. But on the balcony of the castle, two people had seen everything. Jack stood still while beside him, Linnea, the half-fallen, covered her mouth. Her eyes shimmered, turning glassy. Jack gave a faint smile as she leaned into his shoulder. "I told you, Linnea," he said softly. "I told you they'd both find a way." An eternity seemed to pass within that singular moment. A moment they never tried to part from, until he slowly withdrew from her. "Look, Morgaine, he tried to say, but was cut off when she leaned in closer, her lips locking with his. He was silenced once more, sinking into the softness, as she recoiled her wings, and again they were sent free-falling from the sky, naturally floating toward the balcony where they had first departed. Ryuk took his seat this time, as she sat on his lap, legs around his waist, her form wrapping tightly around him like a snake. A mix of golden and snow-white fluttered in the wind. Morgaine finally paused her kiss, resting her forehead against his, feeling the coldness and the slight shiver that ran through her skin. Then she muttered with a faint smile. "You lured me to fall with you?" she said, and Ryuk smiled in return. "What was our goal?" She pressed gently, and he sighed. "To see if you would fall with me," he replied softly, a faint glow crisscrossing his eyes as she embraced him tightly. "I had doubts, Morgaine," Ryuk confessed, and Morgaine's eyelids fluttered open. "Too many doubts. The first was when my location got traced through my number, and I discovered only you had my number in your hands. I had that doubt since then, but it wasn't so deep, until I received the news of the death bounty. And," he was saying when she drew her neck back and kissed him on the lips once more, halting his words. Then she pulled away. It was okay to doubt. I know it all now, she said, looking into his eyes as her hand reached up to brush the strands of hair over his face. But it's not all true, and I feel like you know it now. She tried to speak, but then paused as she looked to the side. It just hurts so much to feel that coldness in your eyes. It was like, you never loved me at all, she whispered, her fingers twisting into each other tightly. But then her chin was gently turned to face him, meeting his intense blue-red gaze. I lost hope. Hope of ever being with you again. I believed it was over, and I let that pain hurt me. And then I healed from it too. Or at least, I tried. While I wandered through the world, enduring pain after pain to drown the sorrow of your absence. You looked into the sky, waiting for my return, he whispered, and there was something in his voice. Something that always shattered her heart so deeply that tears spilled forth. I lost hope, Morgaine. But you never did. I'm sorry for saying I didn't know you anymore. For denying you. For thinking you were no longer the one I once knew. I'm truly sorry, he whispered as she hugged him tighter, clinging to him so hard, as if afraid to lose him again. I love you, Ryuk. I always will. The moonlight shone through the cozy bedroom, casting its silver glow that brought illumination to the scene within. There lay two on a bed, one curled up in the other's arms, her gentle breath rising and falling softly in the quiet room. And the other, none other than Ryuk, smiled as he felt her fingers tighten around his hand, even after she had fallen into a deep, peaceful slumber. He leaned forward, pressing his lips to her forehead, watching as her grip loosened slightly and her breathing grew even calmer. I'm lucky to have you, Ryuk whispered beneath his breath, his gaze drifting to the ceiling where moonlight faintly grazed the side of his face. Then, in his mind, he ordered, Activate system interface. Congratulations, host, on obtaining an important part of your body. Your full and complete skeletal system. The new body part has been successfully and perfectly fused with your nanotech model. Congratulations on completing the following quest. Secret quest. Obtain revenge for Uncle Bob's death. Status. Completed. Rewards. 1. 20 level up cards. 2. 5 million EXP. 3. 1 special skill obtained from Morn, the companion of the 7th calamity. Main quest. Defeat a null calamity. Rewards. 1. 30 level up cards. 2. 10 million EXP. 3. Obtain one of your lost body parts. 4. 500,000 purchase points. Secret quest completed. Save End Earth from its eventual destruction. Rewards. 1. 100 ability upgrade cards. 2. 2 special skill evolution cards. Due to your fusion with your original skeletal system, you have also obtained the following. 1. Plus 5,000 stat points to each of your physical stats. 2. Life expectancy increased to a minimum of 500 years. 3. Bloodline concentration has tripled, resulting in 1. Breakthrough in ether energy level to the Astrocrown realm from the Cymancer stage. 2. Both your Void and Frost cultivation advanced from the Peak Cataclysm stage and Perfection Cataclysm stage, respectively, to the initial stage of Eternity. 3. New skills awakened from both your Draconic and Null bloodlines. The system notification flashed as Ryuk felt a faint grin curl upon his lips. Seems like you never forget anything, system, he muttered to himself. Then his gaze darkened slightly. It's been 4 months since my battle with Zarkul, right? Yes, host. Approximately 4 months and 7 days. Ryuk's expression tensed. Then, I wonder what happened to the group. I remember the entirety of Grade E collapsing from the battle between Zarkul and me. The explosion. I wonder if they managed to retreat fast enough, or if they were caught in it. For months have passed now. Where are they all? He murmured thoughtfully, and just as he was about to enter the pet space to see if Isha or Void was in there, the system blinked once more. You've awakened a special skill that's perfect for checking up on them. Sort out your rewards first, and you'll find it, the system chirped, as Ryuk hummed quietly before turning back to his notifications and giving the command. Activate System Interface. System Interface. Name: Ryuk Null. Race: half null, half dragon. Age: 17. Apex Energy Cultivation. Frost Energy Cultivation. Intella Plane of Eternity Stage. Void Energy Cultivation. Astrocrown Stage. Level: 123. Does host wish to distribute attribute points? No. Not right now, Ryuk muttered to himself. He still remembered how his last level up had gone, and how he'd accidentally burned down the inn. He wouldn't let that happen again. Now that it's settled, move on to the ability you said could help me, he reminded, as the system panel flashed before his eyes. Skills and abilities. Host has obtained a signature skill drop from defeating the Null King, Morn. True skill: Abyssal Clone Twin Thrones of the Abyss. Level 1. Type: Abyssal King. Description: born from the slain core of a Null King, the host now walks with 2 shadows and 1 soul. A clone, perfect, permanent, and soulbound, is forged in Shadow Point 2 bodies. 1 will. 1 stirs while the other sleeps. The throne may shift at a thought. Effects: Echo Form. The host manifests a permanent clone, indistinguishable in form and power. Dual existence. Only 1 body may be conscious at a time. The other rests in silence. Throne shift. Transfer the mind between bodies. The previous body falls dormant. Signature ability: Abyssal Inversion. If 1 body falls, the other awakens at full might, reborn by abyssal law. Cooldown: 12 hours, can be reduced the higher the skill level. This is the skill, the system flashed. Ryuk's brows tightened subtly as images danced across his vision. He recalled it almost instantly. Morn had used this very ability during their battle. Ryuk had cleaved through its neck, only for another body to form anew. Even though he'd slaughtered the vessel, the second Morn clone remained and continued the fight. So, a cloning technique, huh? With this, I can create a second body of my own. But only 1 body is awake at a time, Ryuk mused aloud. But this is just perfect, he thought, then called out. Activate Abyssal Clone. In an instant, pitch black and blue aura surged from Ryuk's body and drifted to the side. It coalesced, writhing into form until a body, identical in every detail, stood beside him, head slightly drooping. Ryuk turned and examined the clone, up and down, scanning every inch. He had to admit it was remarkable. There was no difference at all. And gosh, I didn't think I was this handsome, Ryuk muttered with a sardonic grin. The system let out a sharp tish inside his head, but it only made him grin wider. For the first time, he was seeing himself from an outsider's point of view, and he had to say it was pretty damn cool. Now to switch consciousness, he whispered, closing his eyes. Throne shift. In a flash, Ryuk felt his current self slipping into a deep, irresistible slumber. His body went limp. A moment later, the world brightened again. But it was no longer from the viewpoint he'd known. It was from the other Ryuk. His new eyes blinked open. Hands flexed experimentally. There was almost no difference at all. He was still himself. He glanced down at the original body, already asleep and unmoving. This is good, he murmured. But what if Morbane tries to wake me up? He reached out and placed a hand on his original chest. The moment he touched it, he felt it. A mirrored sensation echoed back into his chest. The heart is barely beating, but I can feel the contact. If she taps more than once, I'll understand she's trying to wake me, and I'll simply switch consciousness. Yes, but you cannot switch consciousness again until 12 hours. You'll need to wait for 12 hours, unless you level up the skill. And how many ability upgrade cards do I currently have? Ryuk asked as the notification blinked. Ability upgrade cards, 120. Special skill evolution cards, 2. Wow, that's a lot. Ryuk mused as the panel flickered again. Yes. You seldom used them, after all. Sounds fair. Ryuk mused. He truly doesn't use his ability upgrade cards that much. A dumb move since they can help boost his skill and make it more powerful. He's usually more or less focused on cultivating and leveling up more. But at least he's figured that out now, and could be more conscious of it in the future. Upgrade Abyssal Clone to level 20, he ordered. Congratulations! The host has used 19 ability upgrade cards. True skill. Abyssal Clones, Twin Thrones of the Abyss, has been leveled up to level 20. Just tell me the cooldown time now. Cooldown? 5 seconds. Ryuk nodded. Good. If she taps me more than once, I'll be back 5 seconds later. That's better than 12 hours. He thought, his gaze drifting to the window. In the next instant, he blinked, appearing before it, just before a void vortex spiraled forth, swallowing him whole and leaving the room silent once more. Vroom! The air flapped as a winged figure sliced through the clouds like a mirage, leaving not even the slightest ripple in his path. It was Ryuk. He had already exited the Eclipse Citadel and was now soaring out of Grade B, heading toward Grade C. His hair whipped around due to the intense breeze. Beneath him, buildings and forests blurred by, the landscape weaving like a painted stream of motion. You don't use your frost element to fly often. In fact, this might be the first time. The system panel suddenly flashed, drawing his attention. What's wrong? Sick of going in and out of wormholes? Teased as Ryuk grinned a bit. No, I'm not sick of using Void Vortex. I just wanted to see End-Earth once more. From above. He replied. Even now, gliding casually, his speed was easily Mach 300 plus. And he wasn't even trying. It showed just how far he had come from his previous power levels. You're done, Ryuk. Your goals here are complete. The system flashed as Ryuk exhaled. Yes, I know that now. Still feels unbelievable. From the time he was young, he'd always dreamed of the day End-Earth would be free from the nulls. Even as a child, clueless about the outside world or what he truly was, he had dreamed of freedom, as the old scrap hunters described it, as a nightmare. He had always wanted to be the one to banish that nightmare off. An ordinary child's dream of a hero, one could say. When Uncle Bob died, this dream had ingrained itself even deeper, and he'd sworn to himself to chase down that bird Null through the skies and cleave off its neck. And then he had moved to Grade B, saw how humans were oppressed, and made another vow, to free humanity from the shackles of the 10 families. He learned more after that, found out his body had been stolen by his people, and made another goal to retrieve it. But now, every single one of those goals he had has been achieved. How do you feel? Liberated? The system asked. Ryuk flew in silence for a long minute before exhaling. Honestly, I'd love for things to end here. I think the little Ryuk in Grade E would have returned home after all the chaos, to settle down to rest. After all, what I told old Jack back then was that I'd remove the core of that null bird, sell it to him for big money, then become one of those old scrap hunters, exaggerating the tales of their childhood. How foolishly simple you were, back then, the system said as Ryuk chuckled. I can't argue that. But there's no home anymore. Maybe I could have lied to myself, said it was still home if it hadn't been destroyed. But now the people of Grade E are gone. Grade E itself no longer exists. Home is still very far away, he muttered. So, the goal now is to return home. Ryuk faintly nodded. Yes, I got another clue from the last memory. The dragons and the nulls fought after my father, Thaith Vorgith, was imprisoned in that artifact. For growing soft or something. But I don't know who won. The nulls are still around, and I haven't seen a single dragon. So, that kind of says it all. But something tells me they're still alive. I want to go back to the dragon homeland. I want to meet her. But what if they lost? Fully lost? Wiped out? Then what? Ryuk's hand clenched subconsciously, frost streaming from his left eye as the air around him froze, only to fade away as he slowly relaxed his fist. Then, I'll visit the nulls. According to Zarkul, my body parts were scattered among the 7. I've retrieved my skeletal system from him. I've already killed the 7th calamity, Zarkul, but there are 6 more. And when I've reclaimed my entire body, the nulls will suffer the same fate as the dragons. Wiped out from existence, never to be seen or heard of ever again. That's quite the conviction. If the nulls wiped out dragons, an upper race, you think you can do it alone? Especially when Zarkul mentioned there's someone among them who has the same, or even greater, potential than you. You mean the one with hurricane energy or something? Yes. I don't know how I'll do it. When I left Grade E, my only goal was to find Morn and kill it. I thought it was only as strong as an A-grade beast, remember? But then, I ended up fighting Zarkul, who was more than 10 times stronger. The battle was hell. I almost died. But in the end, I won. I don't know how I'll defeat an entire evil race. Just like the old me didn't know he'd fight someone like Zarkul. But I am confident when the time comes, I'll give the nulls a battle. A legendary battle. One that, if it doesn't wipe them out, it'll be a scar they'll never heal from. And I'd be there to witness it all. The system spoke, almost with a cheeky tone, as Ryuk grinned at it. Lately, you sound more to me than a robotic system whose only goal is to calculate EXP and level up cards, Ryuk said as the panel blinked. My only goal is not to calculate EXP and level up cards. What's your goal then? He asked. To make sure you achieve the peak of your evolutionary potential. Ryuk hummed thoughtfully. There are an uncountable number of restrictions currently placed on me, which are being unlocked in correlation to your ability to grow stronger. So, I gain more access to unique patterns of speech and the ability to feel the host's emotions and attune to them. As for whether I'm more than a robotic system, that can only be known after I have all of my restrictions unlocked, correlating to you reaching the peak of our evolutionary potential. Then, I'll know more about myself. Ryuk hummed again before nodding. You will one day. I know it. Soon, he arrived above the blue sea that surrounded the island. Even from afar, he could already see the lone landmass. It was nighttime now, but the entire place was lit up with a mix of golden and white light scattered across the ground and walls. Ryuk's eyes glimmered as he noticed the door to his house swinging open. A figure darted out, glancing around rapidly, its nose twitching. It continued to sniff around before suddenly raising its gaze into the sky, locking eyes with Ryuk. Void! Ryuk couldn't hold it in. He unconsciously screamed outward, watching as shock painted the face of the panther before it suddenly disappeared into a vortex and reappeared right before him. But as Ryuk's arms spread wide for a hug, he instinctively dove to the side just in time to dodge 3-meter-long claws slashing downward, ripping through space as Ryuk appeared a meter to the left. Hey! Watch it! He yelled in horror, watching Void cackle wickedly. I was just trying to make sure it was really you. Hey, don't mind it, the cat replied with a mischievous giggle, as Ryuk raised an eyebrow suspiciously. Then, Void yelped as hands suddenly wrapped tightly around him. Crack! The sound of bones creaking echoed in the air, followed by a loud screech as Void screamed out. Hey! Watch it! The panther howled. His spine nearly shattered before Ryuk finally let go of the fierce embrace. You goof! He shrieked, stretching his back out as he replied back mockingly. Oh, I was only trying to make sure it was you. Don't mind it, Void. Ryuk replied with a sadistic grin that made Void's eye twitch in irritation. But then, the cold air behind him caught his attention. He turned around just in time to catch a figure flying into his arms. It was Isha, and the tears wouldn't stop streaming down her face as she clung tightly to Ryuk's shoulders. I thought you... Isha stammered through the tears, and Ryuk gently patted her back. It's okay, Isha. I'm alive and well, he whispered. She eventually stopped crying, wiping away her tears. Then why couldn't we teleport to your side? She asked, and Ryuk grew stunned for a brief moment before the system flashed. It was due to the fusion. It was because of an evolution, Isha. I evolved after the fight. just like how you and Void evolved and went into slumber, too. I went into slumber as well, and the energy wave during the process prevented both of you from reaching my side, he explained, wiping her tears away with his finger as she embraced him once more. She was always the clingy one, or the melodramatic one, as Void would always say jealously. Good to see you're back at least. It's been quite a long time since that battle, a voice called out, as Isha finally released her embrace. Ryuk turned and saw the man stepping forward. Antares, he called, as the crimson-haired man stretched out his hands, gripping Ryuk's shoulders before exerting strength, but then laughed boisterously when he felt Ryuk not flinch in the slightest. Seems like you truly were evolving. Your strength has grown monstrously again, he said, and Ryuk couldn't help but grin. And you've definitely added more scars to yourself. Your energy wave feels like that of the Apocrypha stage now, Ryuk exclaimed. Previously, Antares had only reached the beginning of the Eternal stage after their first battle in the ruin of Niagara. But since then, Antares had recovered and fought more in his Void Rift, his energy level multiplying threefold. That was when he reached the Mid-Eternity stage, but now, the Antares before him was at the Apocrypha stage. It was clear he was evolving even faster. To be honest, I thought you would have left, Antares. I never expected you to wait for 4 months, Ryuk admitted, and the man shrugged. Your pets told me you were definitely still alive, so I knew you'd return one day. Not like I could have left both of them alone to themselves and let them lose hope. It prompted me to wait along with Rak and Aster, he said, stepping aside. Ryuk watched as the two ladies appeared before him. Rakshasa, Asteralaxia? Ryuk called out both names, and for a moment, the words were caught in his throat. His lips moved to say more, but no sound came. But then again, he didn't need to say anything. Rakshasa moved first, giving Ryuk a deep, bone-crushing hug that nearly broke his back. His eyes bulged at her strength before she finally released him, letting his spine breathe again. I knew you'd return soon. You're a monster, after all, she said, and both burst into laughter. Then he turned his gaze back to Aster, who stood there with her arms crossed. She seemed to be debating, and in the end, chose to stretch her right hand out for a handshake. Good to see you're okay, she said. She spoke, but then, surprise spread across her face as she watched Ryuk step forward, embracing her in a warm hug. Thank you, Aster, for staying when you could have left, he whispered into her ear, as Aster's focused expression slowly turned glassy. Then her arms wrapped around his back, hugging him deeply. I'm so glad you're okay, she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion, her tears soaking into his shoulder. The soft clench of teeth in relief echoed faintly in Ryuk's mind. I am, Aster, and it's very relieving to know you're doing fine too. Although, I have to say, I didn't quite expect a business partner to miss my stubborn head so much, he added cheekily after a moment passed in the embrace. Aster finally let go, scoffing with a flustered glare. Shut up, you goof. I don't. Ryuk grinned. Let's go in? Antares' voice rang out, his hand resting on Ryuk's shoulder as they all floated downwards toward the building, disappearing inside. I was afraid you all were caught up in the explosion. I did have hope of Rakshasa surviving it, though. Ryuk's voice rang out through the living room where they all sat, steaming cups of coffee in hand and trays of fried chips laid out before them. Of course, the snacks were made by none other than Ryuk himself, who thought it suited the mood of the conversation. The TV played quietly in the background, news of the war's end and the Endiarthians' departure to their own worlds flickering across the screen. It was a slow report, but it helped balance the atmosphere in the room. The big guy was close to me, so we helped each other out, Void said, sticking out his tongue, dripping with milk, as Antares, seated beside him, rolled his eyes. He almost got turned furless from the blast, though, Antares added. Ryuk snickered, watching Void's jaw drop. But to be fair, he teleported us quite a fair distance away, so I guess it did something at least, he continued, causing Void's nose to twitch as he resumed sipping his milk. Rakshasa helped the rest of us out. She's very strong, Isha said from Ryuk's side. Ryuk turned to glance at Rakshasa, who flashed him a mischievous grin before replying. I just wonder, Ryuk, you do know that the spatial explosion wiped out 65% of the Nulls alive, right? If you were that powerful, why even bring out that army of yours and require our help? Seems like you could have wiped everyone out yourself. Ryuk shook his head. Not really. Unleashing that level of power was mostly driven by rage. You could say I lost my mind back then. Besides, I couldn't have faced an entire army alone while also dealing with Morn and then Zarkul. I would have exhausted too much energy fighting both, and definitely died to Zarkul. And if I died to Zarkul, it would have all been over. So your help was a huge factor in winning the war, he said, and they all slowly nodded. But then Aster asked, I'm guessing Morn is that big null bird we saw at the beginning. But then, who is Zarkul? That question made Ryuk remember. His battle with Zarkul hadn't taken place on Endearth, but in space. They likely never saw him at all, only recognized the powerful shockwave from their first attacks. Just another null, but stronger than Morn, he replied. But I thought Morn was the Null Emperor or something. He seems stronger than the usual Null Kings, she said, but Ryuk gently shook his head again. No, there are Null Wanderers. Then there are Pseudo-Null Kings. Those guys you refer to as Null Kings aren't true Null Kings. Morn is the true Null King, he explained. Then Antares asked, so then Zarkul is a what? A Null Emperor? He guessed. Ryuk replied, no, he's a Null Calamity. One of 7 of them, he said, exhaling deeply. To think, there are 7 more like him out there. That's crazy, he muttered as Ryuk nodded. It is, considering that Zarkul is number 7, most likely the weakest among them, and he's that strong I can't imagine how powerful the others must be. Or how terrifying will the number 1 be? He murmured under his breath. A faint silence followed before Rakshasa's sly grin returned as she teased. Sounds like you plan on going after them all? Or why else would you care? All eyes instantly turned to Ryuk. I don't know, he said, trying to sip his coffee, but paused when he noticed their stares narrowing with suspicion. What? You do plan on going after them all? What? Have you gone insane? Aster asked, and Ryuk rolled his eyes. I just said, I don't know. And what's with accusing me of going insane anyway? He asked, his face scrunched in confusion. You sound in awe of a Null Calamity who's number 7, and now you're talking like you'll face the rest. How is that not insane? And the last time you mentioned taking on the Nulls, you said you no longer needed the top factions, and you'd do it alone. I never said alone. I said you and me, Ryuk corrected. On. That's so cute. Rakshasa chimed with a mock-lovey expression as Ryuk rolled his eyes. I didn't mean it like that. Okay, lady boy, she replied, giggling, and Ryuk could only think. I wonder when I'll finally be rid of the names. But then his expression turned serious as his hand slowly hovered forward, and then it appeared out of thin air. All eyes fixated on the mysterious book that emerged from the void, and they all soon recognized it to be a contract grimoire. Of them all, Aster's eyes gleamed the most, for the contract grimoire he brought out was hers. I think I've delayed you enough, Astralaxia, Ryuk said as she turned to look at him. Still remember the terms? I don't think I still remember that, Aster said, but Ryuk replied. I do, and I think it went along the lines of by the order of the contract grimoire. If you, Aster, stand by the side of I, Ryuk, and you help me in all the ways you can to make sure Endearth wins this war, then I promise, by the order of the contract grimoire, to free you from all contract grimoire orders that I have placed you under. And I think you more than stood by my side and did all you could to win the war. So, as promised, he said, and Aster watched as both contract grimoires before her lit up with a brilliant golden light and crumbled into ashes. Aster's eyes trembled at the sight as she felt a chain seemingly snap within her soul. The restriction that held her was immediately shattered. But then, She suddenly flashed him an evil smile. You do know, I'm still on Endearth and can go slaughter all the humans, right? She said, but Ryuk watched her with a calm, confident grin. I'd bet my life you won't do that. Maybe a possessed Aster, sure. But you? He replied as she rolled her eyes. But then, another voice rang out before more could be said. What about me? Rakshasa said as she turned to Ryuk, flashing him an unfairly treated girl's expression. But then her eyes gleamed as she watched Ryuk stretch out his hands once more. And then another contract grimoire reappeared. It was hers. Our terms are quite simple, Rakshasa. I'm permitted to perform basic actions such as movement, gesturing, or observing the surroundings. However, any action involving physical contact with others, causing harm, or taking life will be strictly prohibited, unless I've obtained your explicit prior permission. The restriction will remain until you're confident that I'm truly of no harm to anyone, as much as any other person is. She cut with her usual wicked grin. But I doubt you can cancel out the grimoire. You shouldn't be confident just yet. I might go harvesting skulls, you know? She asked with a taunting smirk, turning to sip her coffee, only for her gaze to snap back to Ryuk as she watched the contract grimoire slowly burn away. Instantly, the chain on her soul disintegrated into nothing. She stared in shock at Ryuk. You dispersed the contract. It was something Rakshasa never expected. Ryuk dispersing her contract? She believed there was no way he could be that confident in her restraint. After all, she hadn't really done much at all. But he had dispersed it, and looking at him, he didn't seem to have any doubts at all. While I can't bet my life that you wouldn't harm someone like Aster, I at least know you won't harm anyone on Endearth. You have no reason to, and you're no mindless monster. So, you're fine, he said, sipping his coffee casually. That is a risky trust, the system gleamed, but Ryuk just smirked quietly, calmly sipping his drink, seemingly without a care in the world. But then a voice rang out again as Void asked, what about the big guy? What's his contract term? Ryuk placed his coffee down before turning to Antares with a shrug. Antares and I don't have a contract, he said. Void furrowed its brows. And why is that? I feel like he's just as dangerous as the others, no? Void asked as Ryuk grinned. Oh, he of course is. But, men are more stable than women, so... He was saying, but then his ethers surged out. An invisible barrier formed in front of him instantly, catching mid-air the cups of coffee that had been flung at him along with their contents, suspended just before they could reach him. You goof! The words came at the same time from both Aster and Rakshasa as Ryuk pointed at the coffee and silently turned to Void, who replied, Yeah, I see. You're absolutely right, it said, trying to dip its tongue back into its milk bowl, when it instantly phased out from where it was and reappeared beside Ryuk. An instant after, an energy wave blasted where it previously was, dispersing the milk and the bowl into ashes. My milk! You goofs need to learn how to talk to ladies, Aster scolded as Void clicked its tongue before eyeing Ryuk's coffee on the table. You don't dare, Ryuk warned, hand snapping toward the coffee in the next instant. But just before he could reach it, a void vortex materialized beneath it, and the cup vanished into it, reappearing before Void's claws. Ryuk instantly reached to grab the Void Panther, but it erupted into a puff of smoke, reappearing on the stairs a moment later, slowly disappearing upward while purring from the sweet coffee as Ryuk bit his lip. TCH, that bastard. Here, you can have mine if you want, Isha said as she passed her coffee to Ryuk, who wrapped his hand around her neck, playfully scattering her hair. Who's the only person that cares so much for poor Ryuk? Isha, he said, and she giggled softly under his gentle pats. Anyway, Isha, you've reached the Eternity Stage rank. Have you gotten the memory of the map that Elder Selene wants? He asked, and Isha nodded. Good then. We'll visit her soon, he said, and she asked, Are we leaving this world, Ryuk? But then the voice chimed in. Oh? You both are conspiring to commit suicide? Void asked as it puffed back into the living room with the coffee cup nowhere to be found. Void! Ryuk called out as the cat shrugged. What? That's what the phrase means. No? It asked, and Ryuk's eyes dimmed. Yes, we'll be leaving Endearth, Isha. We're done here already. Oh really? Finally, we get to go see a nice new world with most likely many new beautiful bosoms too. I'm getting tired of seeing only... Void was saying before receiving two cold, dagger-like stares, prompting it to pause and adjust its tone. I mean, not seeing much of the unique types here. Hey, maybe there'll be others in the new world. Who knows? It said, as Ryuk rolled his eyes. Then Isha asked, when are we leaving? After we meet with Elder Selene and sort things out. Is the big guy coming with us? Void asked. You do know I have a name, right? Antares called out as he watched the cat wave its paw dismissively. Yes, Antares will. What about Rakshasa and Astralaxia? Are they coming too? Isha asked naively, as Ryuk turned to look at both of them, who had pretty normal expressions. I don't think so. Maybe? He said, as he watched her mutter a quiet, oh, before falling silent, but he consoled. Don't worry, you'll get all the time in the world with them before they leave. The entire day tomorrow, he said, gently ruffling her hair before resuming his walk up the stairs. Midway, he looked outside, noticing the sun slowly rising in the distance, its light chasing away the darkness. We actually stayed up all night? You all need to go to sleep, he said as they rolled their eyes. They were all close to eternity, most even beyond it. Sleep was the last thing they needed. Still, they watched as Void puffed into a gas of smoke that appeared on the stairs, then vanished again, following after Ryuk. Antares sipped the last of his coffee before moving upstairs to his room, leaving Isha, Aster, and the Sukkutera Rakshasa behind. The latter soon brought out her device and began scrolling through it. What are you up to, Void? I can smell your lecherous fur from so far away, you know? Ryuk's voice rang through the room as he fell onto the bed, bouncing a few times before settling. It didn't take a second before, puff, and Void appeared beside his head. Such uncouth words. You offend me, Ryuk, it replied with feigned dignity. Ryuk rolled his eyes at the cat. That's what you are, Void. I'll change my mind if anyone in this house denies it, he said, watching it squint its eyes in thought, as if trying to come up with one, before it shrugged its shoulders indifferently. It knew well, its reputation preceded it in this house. Anyway, Void, I heard there's a cat like you. A Void cat too on Endearth. Ryuk suddenly remembered, turning to the panther lounging beside him. Really? Yes. I heard he's with the Shadow Walker leader or something, he replied as Void hummed in thought. My pure heart just wants to know. Could it be male or female? It asked, as Ryuk's brow twitched slightly. You can't be helped, Void. It's a male. Definitely a male, Ryuk said, and watched all interest instantly drain from Void's eyes. I'm not a Void cat, Ryuk. I'm a Void panther. So no need to go see something so unspecial. It muttered, dismissively flicking its tail. Yeah, right, Mr. Special. Besides, we're going to a new world, so obviously we should be traveling through space. I heard from Rak that there are so many Void creatures in the Void. I guess I'll get to see a lot of them soon. I guess, Ryuk murmured, exhaling a breath. I'm curious, Ryuk. Rak said to travel between space you need something called a, spaceship? Or something like that. It moves fast and only it can resist the crushing Void pressure. If you want to travel, you need that. I'm just wondering. Do you have one? Void asked, as Ryuk's expression tightened a bit. His words made a lot of sense. The last time he had gotten into the Void, he hadn't seen any other living worlds nearby. If this were the wild world, it was safe to say the upper realm would be quite far. He couldn't just fly all the way there non-stop. He needed a spacecraft, and he didn't think his jet, which was obviously designed to attend to occasions on Endearth, could survive that kind of long-distance space travel. Honestly, I don't have a spaceship. At least, not one suited for long journeys. But Elder Selene is planning on Isha leading them back to their world. A world filled with frost wyverns. And I think she's planning on taking the rest of the frost wyverns with her, So it's safe to guess she would have a spaceship if she wants to do that, he said. So we'll be anchoring along? It asked as Ryuk grinned. No, that's too uncourtly. You could say we would be the map to their destination. Hence, a very important reason to be brought along, Ryuk said, turning to look at Void, both of them smiling shamelessly to themselves. Now that sounds more like it, Void said before asking, and Antares will be coming along? I think our route also passes by his world, so yes, it would technically be better to follow us. And Rak and Aster? Why don't you want them to come along? It asked, as Ryuk raised a brow. Me? I never said I don't want them to come along, he replied, as Void gave him a slow blink with knowing eyes. Yes, your eyes said it, the panther replied, turning to lick its paw as Ryuk's gaze gleamed before he eventually sighed and settled. I don't know, Void. All I did in the beginning was try and borrow their strength, really. Aster was knowledgeable, so I thought she would be of use when the Null War came, for humanity to have a strong expert. And Rakshasa too was strong. I thought she would be of help too. But now it's all done, he said, and Void replied. So, you're done with them then? Ryuk wanted to nod but paused, turning a suspicious glance to Void. You make it sound like I used them like tools and now discarded them? He asked as Void shrugged. I think that's what you did, no? He shot back as Ryuk asked. In what way did it seem like that? You borrowed Aster's knowledge and Rak's might for the Nulls. And now that the Null War is over, you didn't hesitate to free them. The contract grimoire, the deals, the terms, and dispersing it into ashes might make things look more technical or righteous or whatever. But really, the summary is you see them as tools, and once you are done with them, you dispose of them. And I think anyone, if they can sit and think about things for a while, will see that's what things really are. Void said as it panther walked toward Ryuk, coming to lie on his chest while staring at him with a sleek, dubious smile. One Ryuk wouldn't admit was even there. Look, Void. There were terms, remember? It wasn't something I forced on them or tried to hide. They both knew the conditions, agreed to them, and signed the contract. It was a deal, and now it's successfully and naturally come to an end. It is a happy ending. Why do you make it sound bad? Ryuk asked, glancing at the cat, which now held him under a piercing, suspicious gaze. Did I? Void asked, and Ryuk rolled his eyes. You can't be helped, Void. But honestly, though, Ryuk, don't you think you might need them sometime in the future? It asked. Actually, you make a good point. I could still utilize their knowledge and power, but every one of them has their own life to live, or a life that has been lived. Their own family, their people to return to. Me crossing their path is just an insignificant part of their lives, he said, as Void's whiskers twitched. I wouldn't be so quick to tag their meeting with you as insignificant, it replied, and Ryuk smiled faintly. Thank you, Void. No, goof. I'm not being melodramatic here, it added. Ryuk's smile vanished almost instantly, and he furrowed his brows as he studied the panther. Something felt off. It was as if Void was trying to say more, keeping a secret it didn't want to say outright. So Ryuk sat up halfway, looking around to ensure no one was nearby before leaning closer to Void's long ear and whispering. What exactly do you want me to know, Void? He asked, voice barely audible, though still picked up by Void, who also scanned the surroundings before leaning back in. You do know, Ryuk, that I'm a Void Panther, sneaking between voids, puffing in and out, creeping through the shadows, saving asses including yours, more times than I care to count, it said. Ryuk nodded, whispering, Of course. You're the most special of them all, after all. Good. Seems like you know your math, Ryuk. But what you don't know is, better than my void jumping and hero-saving skills, there's another ability I'm really good at, eavesdropping, Void whispered, as Ryuk's eyes drifted toward the creature's alert, upright ears. They're like sound radar binoculars. I can pick up a sound, zoom in on it, and listen to everything like it's being said directly to me. And one day, while you were goofing off in your sleep, I snuck up on Aster and Rak's conversation, it said as Ryuk's eyes gleamed with anticipation. You did? he whispered, and Void nodded. Then tell me, what are their secrets? He asked, eyes glowing with curiosity as Void's lips parted. The truth is, Aster and Rak are. And what are you guys doing? A voice suddenly echoed, and both Ryuk and Void flinched in alarm, turning to see Aster and Rak casually walking past the glass door, raising curious brows at the scene before them. All one. Void is into them ladyboys now? Rakshasa teased, her eyes sparkling with a mischievous pink glow. Void snorted. Not in a million years, it said with a loud scoff before puffing away from the room, leaving Rakshasa, Aster, and a dumbfounded Ryuk sitting on the bed, looking thoroughly caught. Tsh, that bastard ain't got my back, he thought, scratching the back of his head. Looks like you two are up to something, Aster said, stepping inside as Ryuk swallowed, watching her approach with a sharp, suspicious look. She climbed onto the bed, crawling towards him, as he instinctively leaned back, until his head thudded against the bed's frame. You, haha. You think so? Ryuk replied with an awkward chuckle. Aster nodded. Yes, you don't usually stammer. So you and Void must be hiding something. Something bad. A giggle rang out from behind. You know, it's easy to get the wrong idea with the pose you two are currently in, Rakshasa chimed in from the hallway. A small vein twitched on Aster's temple, a faint, invisible blush tinging her cheeks. You need a mind-cleansing Rakshasa? She muttered, watching the Sukkutera grin wickedly before strolling out of view. Then Aster turned back, her piercing blue gaze fixing on him. Really, it's nothing, though. We were just talking about some things. What things? Aster asked, sitting properly in front of him, her stare unrelenting until Ryuk could only sigh in defeat. He thinks, I used you. Both of you, he admitted. Aster's raised an eyebrow before she asked, Did you? Ryuk paused, staring deep into those soul-piercing blue eyes, and eventually forced himself to answer. I think I did. You remember when we first met, in that ruin? The deal was to get you out, and your vast knowledge about the Nulls was what made the deal appealing. So really, you could say, I wanted your knowledge. As for Rak, she was strong. I thought she could help me in the final invasion. So, you really did use both of us, huh? Aster said, echoing Void's tone. Ryuk didn't want to agree, but in the end he could only nod. Yes, I did. And? She asked, referring to his earlier conversation with Void. And now Void thinks it's wrong to just end the contracts and let everyone go their separate ways like that. He thinks it's like picking up a tool, using it, and throwing it away once you're done, or something similar to that. He thinks it's bad, Ryuk explained, as Aster hummed thoughtfully. To think that lecherous cat is capable of those types of thoughts. That's more than I expected. She thought, faintly surprised, and Ryuk had to admit he too was surprised. That was the last thing he would expect from Void, and why he did that wasn't something he understood up until now. But then his memories drifted to what Void had to say before he was cut off, and he felt his curiosity rising, prompting him to ask. I'm curious, Aster, Ryuk suddenly said, prompting Aster to turn to him. After you leave Endearth, where are you going? I know you were imprisoned by some pawn of the Eternal Warlock of War, who I think I killed during the trial. But then I started thinking, if he was just one of the pawns, then maybe your enemy is the true Eternal Warlock of War. Are you going out there to look for him? Or are you returning to your world in the upper realm, or? He asked. Aster shrugged, then turned around and sat by his side, her back resting against the bed's headrest. You really want to know? She asked with a grin, but then noticed Ryuk's focused expression. I do want to know, Aster, he said, seriously, as Aster faintly knitted her brows, as if debating before eventually agreeing. The upper realm is divided into two major factions, and each of them has layers to its existence, she began. There's the Celestial Races faction, the so-called good side, and then there's the Evil Conqueror Race faction, which is the bad side. And within the Celestial Races, there are 3 floors. The third floor is the lowest. It consists of many races that are like small tribes, less powerful. The most well-known experts on the third floor are at the Apocrypha stage. And also the Atheres barbarian race, which Antares belongs to, is on the third floor, she explained, and Ryuk nodded, listening intently. The second floor has fewer races, but they're significantly stronger. Apocrypha stage beings are common there, and those who hold real power are the Exiners. You could even encounter Nihil-level experts, though those are rare occasions. These races are quite powerful. I belong to one of them. The Soul Flora race, she said. Ryuk's eyes widened slightly. It was the first time he had heard her reveal her race. Our race isn't built for battle. We're a knowledge-based race, and we've had an ancient alliance with another race, a battle-focused one. The Warlock race. Since we specialize in knowledge and they in combat, we formed a symbiotic bond. We guide them, help improve their civilization, tutor their young ones, and they defend us when needed. Many races in the upper realm form such bonds. It's nothing new, she added. Ryuk tilted his head slightly. So I'm guessing this eternal warlock of war belongs to the Warlock race? Yes, he does. Then how did you end up imprisoned by him in your own realm? There was a ridiculous rule binding both races. The leaders decided that the royals of each race should marry to strengthen the alliance. But here's the catch, the leaders themselves chose the partners. One royal from the Warlock race and one from the Soul Flora race would be selected. The Warlocks chose their candidate. He was the most promising talent of their race. They called him the Eternal Warlock of War or whatever. Her voice dripped with disdain. He was chosen for the bond. But the elders of my race didn't want him, she said, as Ryuk raised a brow in confusion. Why not? Because both races believed their royalty was sacred and therefore, the ones who will be chosen for the bonding must have their hearts untouched by anything or anyone. But that bastard, the Eternal Warlock of War, was a lecherous scum. Forget having his heart scarred. He probably doesn't even remember how many women he's slept with. He saw them as trophies to be accumulated, bragging about the numbers. The Soul Flora elders were completely against it. Same for the Warlock race elders too, but they didn't do anything. Why? Because he, the Eternal Warlock of War, was the most pure in bloodline. So they hoped that by combining his pure bloodline with a royalty of our Soul Flora race, a stronger, purer dual bloodline might emerge from the bonding. So, the elders of the Soul Flora race, unwilling to destroy more than centuries-old alliance, decided to offer one of the less important members of royalty for the marriage. The one who is unimportant and who they don't mind being one of many of the collections of a lesser scum. And guess who they chose? She asked, her tone dry. You, Ryuk replied. Exactly, she said. Ryuk sat in silence for a moment. That must have been a nightmare. It was, she admitted, her voice dropping lower. But then Ryuk noticed something strange. A faint smirk curling at the corner of her lips. It sent a chill down his spine. Why do I feel like you did something worse? I actually agreed to the marriage. They held the ceremony and everything. But that night, I made sure to save countless women from ever falling prey to his lust again. And that, of course, led to my imprisonment. What did you do that night? He asked carefully, watching her face as the color in his own slowly drained. Aster tilted her head, her expression playful and wicked. Hey, you really want to know? Just then, the system chimed in. If she said she saved many women from becoming prey to that lecherous bastard, then the only way to do that is by severing off his manhood. Ryuk's lap muscles unconsciously tightened as he folded his legs, a cold shiver creeping up his spine, something that didn't escape Aster's eyes as she giggled. Don't tell me, he muttered. She nodded with a devilish gleam in her eyes. Yes, I did. That's quite cold, he murmured. Yes, it sounds extreme, but trust me. That night, when his scream echoed across the entire universe, I was praised as a hero by everyone. The elders of his race were, of course, furious, but even they were secretly grateful. His lecherous ways distracted him from his potential. Slicing off his manhood was something they likely wanted done long ago but never dared to act on. Ryuk stared at her, stunned, with bits of sweat dripping down the back of his neck. He didn't have a third leg, but he could imagine getting it cut off would probably hurt more than having a finger ripped off. He just knew it. But was it really worth it for you, though, getting stuck in your realm for so long? She shrugged without hesitation. It was. Trust me. But now, I'm lost. Returning home is so complicated, she murmured. Ryuk understood in an instant. Things weren't just complicated, they were dangerous, and the eternal warlock of war was just one of the factors that made things worse for her.